So, have you ever wondered how a huge global company actually decides which country to expand into next? You might think it's like throwing a dart at a map, right? Well, the real process isn't about luck at all. It's this fascinating, super disciplined science, and we're about to break it all down.
When it comes to big topics like global business and trade, it feels like everyone has a strong opinion. It's like Professor Vostaris says here, people are so quick to jump in and say, oh, let me tell you the correct answer. The problem is, those answers usually come from biased headlines or heated political debates, not from, a real understanding of the facts. And that's what makes this whole thing so challenging.
Okay, so if the public conversation is just filled with all this noise, how do the world's most successful companies manage to tune it all out? I mean, how do they get past gut feelings and angry headlines to make billion-dollar decisions about where to go next? They do it with a process, a really rigorous four-step screening method that works kind of like a funnel. You take all 195 countries in the world and pour them into the top. This system then filters them down, step by step, weeding out all the noise until only the best, most logical options remain at the bottom. It's all about turning an overwhelming choice into a clear, strategic one. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to walk through this exact four-step process together. We'll start with getting past the headlines, then check for basic appeal, dig into the national environment, measure the real potential, and finally, make that crucial selection. So first things first, we have to get beyond the headlines. The whole key here is to replace all those noisy opinions with a structured, intelligent framework. Okay, let's dive into step one, the basic appeal. You can think of this as the first big common sense filter. And honestly, this is the step that can save a company from making a massive multi-million-dollar mistake right off the bat. So what exactly is basic appeal? Well, it's the absolute ground floor. It's just asking two fundamental questions. One, is there a basic need for our product here? And two, are the resources we need, things like labor or raw materials, are they actually available? This is the first major go or no-go decision. This might sound totally made up, but this is a true story. Early in its global expansion, Walmart, get this, actually sent a shipment of ice fishing huts to its stores in Puerto Rico. I mean, seriously, it's the perfect, almost comical example of what happens when you completely fail to assess basic appeal. It seems so simple, doesn't it? But this is the most critical first step. It immediately filters out the really obvious blunders. Because if there's no demand or the basic resources aren't there, nothing else matters. That country is just, poof, immediately off the list. Okay, so once a country passes that initial sanity check, it's time for step two, assessing the national environment. This is where the focus shifts from the company's product to the country itself. At this stage, a company basically has to become an expert on the country's entire ecosystem. They dig into everything. Cultural forces like traditions and work ethic, political stability and regulations, economic risks like currency and inflation, and even the simple logistics of just moving goods around. A great product can totally fail if the environment around it is hostile. And this brings us to a really subtle but incredibly powerful force, the country image effect. Think about it. When you hear made in Germany, you immediately think of high-quality engineering, right? But what about made in Bolivia? The textbook asks this really sharp question: would a Rolls-Royce succeed if it were made in Bolivia? Even with identical quality, the public's perception tied to that country's image could doom it from the start. That's a huge environmental factor. So we filtered for appeal and we've analyzed the environment. Now for step three, measuring the real potential. This is where we move away from broad factors and get into the cold, hard data. The whole point here is to replace feelings with facts. Analysts compare the countries still in the running using objective data, market size, growth rate, and something called market intensity, which is just a fancy way of measuring the buying power of the market. They score everything from infrastructure to country risk. This is how a vague feeling like, this seems like a good country, gets translated into a hard number like, this country has a market potential score of 8.2. And to do this, they use some pretty powerful tools. These data maps let them visualize key indicators all across the globe. What we're looking at here is phone and internet penetration, a key part of that commercial infrastructure. With just one look, you can immediately spot which regions are highly connected and which ones aren't. It's a super fast, effective way to compare dozens of countries on a single metric. So after all that screening and all that data analysis, a company is left with just a handful of promising candidates. Now comes the final, and maybe the most intensive step of all, the final selection. This final stage really boils down to two key actions. First, conducting field trips to the finalist countries, and second, performing a really deep, detailed analysis of the competitors who are already on the ground there. Data can only tell you so much. Now it's time for some real-world experience. And these field trips are absolutely critical. This is where executives get out of the boardroom and get their boots on the ground. They're there to see the culture firsthand, to meet the local workforce, and to make those personal connections that are so vital for business. It's about capturing that feel for a place that no spreadsheet can ever provide.
So you see, it's the complete opposite of just throwing a dart at a map. It's a disciplined, logical funnel. You start with the whole world, filter out the non-starters, analyze the environment, quantify the potential with data, and finally, confirm it all on the ground. You're left with just a small handful of data-backed, well-researched finalists. And that really leaves us with a final thought. We have more data than ever before. We can analyze markets with incredible precision using AI and big data. But as we've just seen, that final step still relies on human experience, the field trip, the handshake, the cultural observation. So the question is this process becoming a perfect science? Or will choosing where to go global always be, just a little bit of an art?